+80%. Welcome to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Briefs, what's coming up next week in the world. So starting off Monday, June 22nd, is absolutely stacked. And honestly, it feels like the international system decided to load all its Monday meetings at once. In New York, the UN Security Council is scheduled to hold a briefing on Ukraine. That's the usual heavyweight forum where everyone shows up, makes their position clear, and reminds the room that nobody is changing their mind anytime soon. Think diplomatic chess, but everyone is playing 3 different games at the same time and insisting they are winning. Same day, Russia is observing its Day of Memory and Sorrow. This is one of those deeply symbolic national moments tied to the start of the Second World War for the Soviet Union. Expect ceremonies, speeches, and the kind of historical framing that Moscow leans into heavily when it wants to connect present-day messaging with the Great Patriotic War narrative. It's part remembrance, part state identity reinforcement, and very much a fixed annual moment in Russia's political calendar. Also in New York on Monday, the UN Security Council is expected to hold Syria-related consultations and briefing activity. That file never really goes quiet. It just shifts volume depending on regional tensions. And then over in Brussels, you've got the EU-Moldova summit. That one matters because Moldova continues to sit in a very uncomfortable neighborhood next to Ukraine and Russia's broader sphere of pressure. European leaders are likely to lean heavily into messaging about support, resilience, and keeping Moldova on a steady EU track. Now add to that the BRICS National Security Advisors meeting taking place across Monday and Tuesday in New Delhi. That's where you get the behind-the-scenes alignment check between major emerging powers: China, India, Russia, and others trying to find common language on global security issues. And common language is doing a lot of work there, because historically that group tends to agree on structure and disagree on substance. It's a bit like assembling the Avengers, but half the team insists they are in a different franchise. Moving to Wednesday, June 24th, the UN Security Council holds a children and armed conflict debate. This is one of those thematic sessions that often becomes a global mirror for how wars are being discussed, framed, and politically interpreted. Expect a lot of carefully chosen language and reminders that every conflict eventually finds its way into these chambers, whether leaders like it or not. Then Thursday, June 25th, is where things ramp up again. In Gdańsk, the Ukraine Recovery Conference takes place across Thursday and Friday. This is the big international reconstruction and investment forum focused on Ukraine's long-term rebuilding. Expect announcements, funding commitments, and a lot of strategic positioning about who is backing what. At the same time, North Korea marks the anniversary of the Korean War outbreak, a date that Pyongyang regularly uses for strong ideological messaging and anti-US rhetoric. That day also sees the Secretary General's report under Resolution 2334 coming through at the UN, feeding into the ongoing Israel-Palestine diplomatic track. And just to round out the Middle East and security calendar, UNDOF-related mandate discussions remain part of the broader UN Security Council rhythm around this period, keeping the Israel-Syria disengagement line quietly on the radar. Finally, Friday, June 26th brings the EU Energy Council in Brussels. Energy security, supply resilience, and regional contingency planning are expected to dominate, especially with global markets still hypersensitive to geopolitical disruptions. Looking at the watch list heading into the week, a few things to keep an eye on. Any follow-through announcements from the Ukraine Recovery Conference will matter, especially around funding and reconstruction partnerships. BRICS messaging consistency is another one, particularly on Iran and wider security language, where unity tends to be more aspirational than operational. DPRK rhetoric around its anniversary period is also always worth watching, because Pyongyang rarely lets that calendar moment pass quietly. And finally, EU financial and military support sequencing for Ukraine continues to develop in the background, often showing up in late-week statements rather than headline summits. So that's your week ahead. Thanks for listening. If this was useful, a quick review or comment helps others find the show. For deeper coverage, check out our daily intel brief on Substack at restrictedhandling.substack.com. Have a great day.